The emergency beacon pierced through the pre-dawn silence of mining station Epsilon 7. Like a needle through fabric, Jake Morrison rolled out of his bunk, already reaching for his toolkit before his feet hit the cold metal floor. 23 years of fixing everything from atmospheric processors to coffee makers had taught him that urgent usually meant dangerous. The beacon's coordinates led him 3 kilometers into the crystalline desert, where twisted metal and still glowing debris painted an alien constellation across the purple sand. At the crater's center lay a ship unlike anything in the colonial fleet. Database's sleek curves of impossible alloys that seemed to shift color in the twin sunlight. Holy, Jake breathed. Approaching cautiously, a section of the hull suddenly dilated like an iris, and she emerged. Jake's first coherent thought was that the universe had just become infinitely more interesting. Her skin was the pale blue of winter sky, luminous and smooth as polished stone. Vibrant red curls framed a face that was unmistakably feminine yet otherworldly, high cheekbones, large eyes the color of deep ocean, and lips that seemed designed for purposes he couldn't quite articulate. She wore a form-fitting suit of the same shifting material as her ship, and when she saw him, she straightened with obvious wariness. They stared at each other across the debris field. 2 different species taking each other's measure. I am Kira of the Nexari, she said, her voice carrying a musical quality that made Jake's name sound clumsy. When he offered it in return, my vessel requires repair. Are you capable of mechanical assistance? Her English was flawless but stilted, as if she'd learned it from textbooks rather than conversation. Jake nodded, trying to process the reality of first contact happening in his backyard. I'm the chief mechanic here, he managed. What kind of help do you need? Kira's ocean blue eyes swept over him with calculating intensity. Your species' approach to machinery is intuitive, inefficient by our standards, yet you achieve functional results. This is puzzling. Something in her tone suggested she found puzzles irresistible. Jake grinned, hefting his toolkit. Well, let's see what we can figure out together. As they walked toward her ship, Kira's gaze lingered on the easy confidence in his movements, the way his hands gestured as he spoke. Her people had sent her to study human technology, but she was beginning to suspect the most interesting research subject might be the human himself. 3 days into the repairs, Kira had filled 17 digital notebooks with observations about Jake's work methods. What fascinated her wasn't just his technical skill, it was the way he seemed to feel his way through problems, using intuition where her people would employ pure logic. Your pulse rate increases when you encounter mechanical challenges, she observed, watching him wrestle with her ship's quantum core housing. Yet you appear to enjoy the elevated stress response. This is illogical. Jake paused, wrench in hand, and shot her a grin that made something flutter in her chest, a sensation she dutifully recorded. Some of the best parts of life are illogical. Kira, elaborate, she said, moving closer with her scanning device. And please remain still while I document your biometric responses. You're studying me like a lab specimen, Jake laughed, but he didn't move away when she stepped into his personal space. Her pale blue skin seemed to glow in the ship's interior lighting, and her scent was like ozone after a lightning storm. All data serves a purpose, Kira replied, though her voice had grown softer. Your species forms emotional attachments that influence decision-making. My people need to understand this for future diplomatic relations. She was close enough now that he could see the subtle patterns in her skin, like frost on glass. When she reached out to place a sensor against his chest, her fingers lingered longer than necessary. What's this reading? She asked, studying her device with apparent confusion. Attraction. Jake said simply, it's what happens when the beings find each other interesting. Kira's large eyes widened. You are attracted to me, despite our physiological differences, especially because of them, Jake admitted. You're brilliant, you're beautiful, and you ask questions that make me think about everything differently. She tilted her head. Processing this information, I must conduct further research into this phenomenon. Would you consent to additional compatibility assessments? The way she said it made Jake's pulse spike again, and he was certain her scanner caught every beat. What kind of assessments? Proximity tests, tactile response evaluation, Perhaps some analysis of your bonding mechanisms. Her fingers traced the edge of his collar, ostensibly adjusting her sensor. Purely scientific, of course. Jake's smile was knowing. Of course. When do we start? Kira's research had taken on a decidedly hands-on approach over the past week. She'd mapped the sensitivity of Jake's skin with methodical precision, cataloged his reactions to different types of touch, and documented the correlation between proximity and his physiological responses. Human bonding appears to involve significant tactile communication, she murmured, her fingers tracing the muscles of his forearm as he worked. They were alone in her ship's engine bay, the space humming, with alien technology and thick with tension. You could say that, Jake replied, his voice rougher than usual, every day. Kira found new excuses to touch him, adjusting his position for optimal ergonomics, testing his thermal regulation responses, or simply standing close enough that her breath whispered across his skin. I need to understand how humans express affection, she said, moving to stand in front of him. My databases are inadequate. Jake set down his tools and turned to face her fully. And this is still just research. Something flickered in her ocean blue eyes. I am a scientist, she said, but her voice wavered slightly. I observe. I analyze. You're beautiful, Jake interrupted, reaching up to cup her face. Her skin was warm despite its alien coolness, and she leaned into his touch like a flower turning toward sunlight. That is not scientifically relevant, she whispered, but her hands came up to rest on his chest, isn't it? Jake stepped closer, eliminating the space between them. You've been studying human attraction for days. What conclusions have you reached? Kira's breath caught. That it creates unpredictable variables, that it compromises logical decision-making, that it makes me want to abandon my research protocols entirely, then abandon them, Jake said softly, his thumb stroking across her cheekbone. Just for a minute, when their lips met, it was like completing a circuit. Kira's careful scientific control shattered, and she kissed him back with desperate hunger, her hands fisting in his shirt. She tasted like starlight and possibility. And Jake lost himself in the sensation of her mouth against his. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Kira stared up at him with wide eyes. I need to record this data, she said shakily. Later, Jake murmured, pulling her back into his arms. The experiment isn't finished yet. This time, when she kissed him, there was nothing scientific about it at all. The communication from the Nexari fleet arrived at the worst possible moment. Just as Kira was discovering that human bonding mechanisms were far more complex and intoxicating than any of her research had prepared her for. They're demanding my immediate return, she said, staring at the holographic message with something approaching panic. She and Jake lay tangled together in her ship's quarters, their bodies still humming from their latest compatibility assessment. Jake's arms tightened around her waist. How long do we have? 3 days. Maybe 4 if I can convince them the ship isn't ready. Kira turned in his embrace, her pale blue skin luminous in the dim light. Jake, I need to tell you something. My research stopped being about data collection weeks ago. I know, he said, pressing a kiss to her forehead. When did you realize it? When I found myself prioritizing your sleep patterns over my repair schedule. When I started hoping for complications that would delay my departure. When I realized I was falling in love with you and didn't care that my people would consider it a complete compromise of scientific objectivity. Jake's heart clenched at the raw honesty in her voice. Kira, I love you, she said, the words tumbling out in a rush. I love your curiosity, your kindness, the way you make me feel like I'm more than just a collection of research protocols. I love how you touch me like I'm precious, how you make me laugh. How you've shown me that the most important discoveries can't be quantified. Jake rolled her beneath him, cradling her face in his hands. I love you too, more than I ever thought possible. Their lovemaking that night was desperate and tender, a frantic attempt to memorize every touch, every sensation. Kira's scientific mind cataloged each moment even as her heart broke, knowing that this might be all they would ever have. There has to be a way, Jake murmured against her skin. Some loophole. Some argument you can make to your people. Kira's fingers traced patterns on his chest, her touch already memorizing him. Interspecies relationships are unprecedented. They'll say I've been compromised by alien influences. Then we'll prove them wrong, Jake said fiercely. We'll show them that love isn't a compromise, it's an evolution. But even as he spoke, they both knew that 3 days might not be enough to convince an entire civilization to change their fundamental beliefs about logic and emotion. The Nexari retrieval ship descended like a silver teardrop against the desert sky, its presence making the mining station's technology look primitive by comparison. Kira stood beside Jake, her research uniform replaced by the flowing robes of her people, but her hand was firmly clasped in his. Kira of the Nexari, the delegation leader intoned as they approached, your prolonged absence has been noted. Your research parameters were clearly defined. Why do you delay? Because my research is incomplete, Kira replied, her voice steady despite the way her heart hammered against her ribs. I have discovered variables that were not accounted for. In my original parameters, the leader's expression remained impassive. Explain. Kira squeezed Jake's hand and stepped forward. I was sent to study human mechanical intuition, but I discovered that human intuition extends far beyond machinery. They possess emotional intelligence that allows them to form bonds that transcend logic bonds, that make them stronger, more creative, more capable of innovation. You speak of emotional compromise, another Nexari said dismissively. We have evolved beyond such primitive responses, have we? Kira challenged. We build perfect ships, but we've never created anything that inspires the passion I've witnessed here. We solve problems through pure logic, but we never have the breakthrough, moments that come from intuitive leaps. We've achieved technological superiority, but we've never experienced the kind of partnership that makes two beings greater than the sum of their parts. She gestured to Jake, who stepped forward despite the intimidating presence of the aliens surrounding them. This human has taught me that love isn't a weakness to be eliminated, it's a strength to be cultivated. My research has shown that interspecies cooperation based on emotional understanding could revolutionize our approach to exploration, diplomacy, and innovation. The delegation exchanged glances, their expressions unreadable. Finally, the leader spoke. You wish to remain here to continue this research? I wish to stay because I've found something worth studying for the rest of my life, Kira said firmly, and because the data I could collect on long-term interspecies bonding could benefit both our civilizations. Jake spoke up, his voice respectful, but determined. Your people are master engineers, but if you want to truly understand the universe, you need to understand the beings who inhabit it. Kira can be your bridge to that understanding, the silence stretched taut. Then the leader nodded slowly. You will submit regular reports on your findings. This research station will be monitored, and if your emotional compromise proves detrimental to your scientific capabilities, it won't, Kira said confidently. Love doesn't compromise scientific ability, it enhances it. As the Nexari ship departed, Kira turned to Jake with tears of joy sparkling in her ocean blue eyes. I hope you're prepared for a very long experiment, she said. Jake pulled her into his arms, spinning her round as she laughed. I'm looking forward to spending the rest of my life helping you gather data. Their kiss was witnessed by two suns and infinite stars, a perfect fusion of science and romance that would indeed change both their worlds forever.